isn't for you. Move now.
Black triplets denied first-class moments later. Their silencio dad shocks everyone. But what this 30-year veteran flight attendant said while blocking three 12-year-old children from their paid seats will make you question whether airport authority has become the last refuge for people who believe black excellence must be fraudulent. I don't care what the computer says, those kids don't belong in first class. I know the type. Lead flight attendant Susan Carmichael's voice carries through the jetway of Flight 847 from Orlando to Seattle, her 61 years of life and 30 years with the airline giving her confidence that her racism will go unchallenged, her hand blocking the entrance as triplets Caleb, Cameron and Chloe Mitchell stand frozen with boarding passes that say 1A, 1B and 1C but might as well say you don't belong here. The words hit the 12-year-olds like physical assault. Standing in that confined jetway space watching their exhausted hope for comfortable travel home dissolve because a woman decided their black skin couldn't possibly belong to children whose father paid for first class, couldn't possibly deserve the comfort she believes belongs to other people's children, couldn't possibly have legitimate tickets because legitimacy and blackness don't coexist in her worldview. Here's what people refuse to accept about racism in 2026. It's not just alive, it's thriving in positions of petty authority where badges and uniforms provide cover for prejudice that would be unacceptable without institutional protection. And in some ways that makes it more insidious than Jim Crow because at least segregation was honest about its hatred. At least back then the signs said exactly who wasn't welcome. Now racism hides behind we're just following policy and I'm maintaining standards while it destroys children's dignity with the confidence of someone who's never faced consequences. Caleb, Cameron and Chloe aren't surprised by Susan's accusation. They're shocked, yes, because you're never quite prepared for an adult to call you liars in front of strangers, to suggest your family are thieves or frauds, to block your path like you're criminals trying to sneak into spaces you don't deserve. But surprised? No. This is their reality as black children in America. The teacher who questioned whether they really did their own science project, the coach who seemed disappointed when they made the team, the store employee who followed them through aisles assuming they were stealing. Each time the same message delivered with a smile, you don't belong in excellence. Your success must be explained away, your achievements must be questioned. But ma'am, these are our seats. Chloe tries to explain through tears that are already starting. Our dad bought these tickets. You can verify them, we just want to sit down and go home. Your dad bought first-class tickets. Susan's voice drips with disbelief and contempt. Sure he did, with what money? Let me guess he used points he didn't really earn or miles that don't belong to your family. I've seen this before. She radios the gate agent loud enough for boarding passengers to hear. We have a situation, 3 unaccompanied minors with first-class tickets that don't seem legitimate. Can you verify how these were actually purchased? Because this doesn't add up. The triplets stand there humiliated while passengers stream past them into the aircraft, some looking sympathetic but all staying silent, some pulling out phones to record but none speaking up, witnesses accumulating but courage absent, bystanders who will later claim they didn't want to get involved when the truth is they chose comfort over justice. We need to call our dad, Caleb says desperately, pulling out his phone. He can explain everything, he can verify the tickets. Please just let us call him. Your phones stay off until we resolve this, Susan snaps. And if you keep being disruptive, I'll have you removed from this flight entirely for interference with crew operations. Cameron, the quietest of the 3, asks the question that will break your heart. Why does she think we're bad? We haven't done anything wrong. Why does she hate us? If you believe no child should be publicly humiliated by an adult whose prejudice matters more than their paid tickets, keep watching. If you think discrimination at 30,000 feet ended decades ago, you need to see what happens when these triplets finally reach their father who built a tech empire but never forgot growing up black in Alabama. And if you've ever been treated like your success must be fraudulent because of your skin color, drop a comment below and tell us your story. We're reading every single one. Tell us where you're watching from and what time it is right now. This story doesn't end the way you think. Hit that like button if you stand against racism and subscribe to this channel because we're exposing the discrimination that happens when authority meets prejudice and children pay the price. Susan calls for her supervisor, announces loudly enough for first-class passengers to hear. I'm exercising my discretion as lead flight attendant. These children cannot be seated in first class. There are regulations about unaccompanied minors in premium cabins. But there aren't such regulations. She's inventing policy to justify prejudice, creating rules that don't exist to exclude children whose only crime is being black and having tickets she doesn't think they deserve, and 90 minutes of nightmare is about to begin while their father sits in a meeting 3,000 miles away with his phone silenced, unaware his children are being destroyed by racism wearing a uniform. But to understand how 3 12-year-old children ended up trapped in a jetway being accused of ticket fraud by a flight attendant who couldn't imagine black excellence, you need to know who Caleb, Cameron, and Chloe Mitchell really are, and more importantly you need to understand why this trip home from their grandparents represents the kind of childhood joy that racism loves to destroy. Caleb, Cameron, and Chloe are identical triplets. Well, technically Caleb and Cameron are identical and Chloe is fraternal, but they've been inseparable since birth. 12 years old, 7th grade at Lakewood Academy in Seattle, honor students who excel at everything from debate team to robotics to track, the kind of kids who make their teachers proud and their parents grateful. They're polite beyond their years, raised by parents who taught them that excellence is expected and kindness is non-negotiable, that they represent not just themselves but generations who fought for their right to sit anywhere, that being twice as good is unfair but necessary. They just spent a magical week in Florida with Nana Grace and Papa Joe, their maternal grandparents who retired to Orlando 5 years ago, celebrating the older couple's 50th wedding anniversary with theme parks and beach trips, and the kind of unhurried time that grandparents give better than anyone. Nana Grace is 72, a retired elementary school teacher who spent 40 years shaping young minds in Seattle public schools, who remembers teaching during integration, who has stories about the civil rights movement that she shares to make sure her grandchildren understand the cost of the freedoms they enjoy. Papa Joe is 74, a Vietnam veteran who served 2 tours and came home to a country that didn't appreciate his service, who worked as a mechanic for 30 years, who taught the triplets that dignity isn't given but claimed, that respect is earned through character not demanded through volume. This anniversary trip was their gift to the triplets. A week of creating memories before the kids get too old and too busy for extended grandparent time, days filled with laughter and love and the security of being cherished. The triplets carry evidence of that love in their backpacks, hand-knitted scarves Nana Grace made in each of their favorite colors, a photo album Papa Joe compiled with pictures from the week, his shaky handwriting labeling each image with dates and captions, leftover homemade pecan pie carefully wrapped because Nana insisted they take some home to their mother who loves her cooking. These aren't just souvenirs, they're tangible reminders that they're loved, that they belong to a family with deep roots and proud history, that their grandparents survived worse than anything the triplets will face and pass down resilience along with recipes. Their father Marcus Mitchell is CEO of QuantumCore Solutions, a tech company worth $8.3 billion, a man who built an empire from nothing but keeps such a low profile that most people don't know his name, no social media presence, rare press appearances, travels under his middle name, lives in a modest house despite wealth that could buy mansions. He grew up poor and black in rural Alabama, knows what it means to be underestimated and dismissed, built his success on being smarter and working harder than everyone who doubted him, never forgot where he came from even as he climbed higher than anyone expected. He booked his children in first class for the 5-hour flight home because after a week of Florida heat and theme park crowds he wanted them to rest comfortably, to arrive home refreshed not exhausted, to experience the kind of travel comfort his wealth can provide, never imagining that 3 first-class tickets would become evidence of fraud in the mind of a flight attendant who couldn't see past their skin color. Their mother Dr. Kendra Mitchell is a pediatric surgeon at Seattle Children's Hospital, currently in the middle of a complex operation, her phone silenced in the OR, unavailable to rescue her children from the nightmare unfolding at Orlando Airport, trusting that the systems designed to protect young travelers will actually protect them. That morning the triplets woke early in their grandparents' guest room, packed their bags carefully, triple-checked they had everything, hugged Nana Grace extra long because leaving her always feels hard, shook Papa Joe's hand the way he taught them because Mitchell men shake hands with respect. The drive to the airport was filled with promises to FaceTime every Sunday, to send pictures from school events, to come back next summer for another week. Check-in at Orlando International went smoothly, the agent friendly and efficient, commenting on how well-behaved they were for 12-year-olds traveling alone, wishing them safe travels. Security was routine, TSA agents professional, one asking about the pecan pie and laughing when Cameron explained it was contraband. Nana wouldn't let them leave without. The gate area was typical holiday travel chaos. Families returning from Disney vacations, business travelers typing on laptops, college students with oversized backpacks heading back to winter term. The triplets found seats near the windows, played games on their phones, texted their parents that they were at the gate, counted down minutes until boarding. Then Susan Carmichael arrived for her shift, 30-year veteran flight attendant whose personnel file contains complaints about rudeness and suspected racial profiling, complaints that were noted but never resulted in consequences because seniority and union protection matter more than passenger dignity, whose reputation among crew is territorial about first class, protective of premium cabin space like it's hers to guard. She's white, professional appearing in her crisp uniform, carrying herself with the authority of 3 decades experience, someone who knows the rules and believes her judgment supersedes policy, whose confidence intimidates people into compliance even when she's wrong, who's learned that challenging her creates problems so most people don't. Susan scans the gate area during boarding, her eyes landing on 3 black children with first-class boarding passes, traveling alone based on their unaccompanied minor lanyards, heading to expensive seats she doesn't think they deserve, fitting a profile that exists only in her prejudiced assumptions about who belongs in premium travel, her mind already constructing the narrative that something must be wrong here. Susan watches the triplets approach the jetway entrance, her eyes narrowing as she processes 3 black children with first-class boarding passes, her decades of experience telling her something must be wrong here, her prejudice dressed up as professional skepticism about to destroy 3 kids who just want to go home. "Excuse me, kids." Her voice carries that particular tone adults use when they're about to correct children they assume are making mistakes. "I think you're in the wrong line. First class is this way. Economy boarding is back there at gate C12. The triplets stop, exchange confused glances, Caleb speaking for all 3 with the politeness their parents drilled into them. "We know, ma'am, we're in first class, seats 1A, 1B and 1C. Our boarding passes say Zone 1. He holds up his pass, Cameron and Chloe doing the same, 3 identical documents showing their names and their premium seats, legitimate tickets purchased by a father who wanted his children comfortable, evidence that should end this interaction immediately. But Susan's expression hardens instead of softening, her suspicion deepening rather than dissolving, her hand reaching out with authority that brooks no argument. "Let me see those boarding passes, all 3 of them, right now." She examines them with theatrical scrutiny, holding them up to light like she's checking for watermarks on counterfeit bills, running her fingers over the print like she might detect forgery through touch, performing investigation for an audience of boarding passengers who slow their progress to watch. The triplets stand there increasingly uncomfortable, aware that people are staring, that this public examination suggests they've done something wrong, that their skin color is being treated as probable cause for fraud. Susan pulls out her radio, her voice deliberately loud. "Gate agent, this is lead flight attendant Carmichael on flight 847. I have a situation here, 3 unaccompanied minors presenting first-class tickets that seem irregular. Can you verify how these were actually purchased?" The gate agent Maria responds within seconds, confusion in her voice. "The tickets are legitimate, purchased 2 weeks ago with credit card, full fare first class, everything cleared normally. What's the issue?" "The issue is their children," Susan says with exasperation. "Children traveling alone with first-class tickets? This doesn't seem right. Who buys first class for unaccompanied minors? Something doesn't add up here." "Ma'am, our dad bought them," Chloe tries to explain, her voice already shaking with the stress of being questioned. "He wanted us to be comfortable flying home. We've flown before. We know how to behave." "I'm sure you have," Susan's tone drips with condescension and disbelief. "But I'm exercising my discretion as lead flight attendant. There are regulations about unaccompanied minors in premium cabins. Children under 16 cannot be seated in first class without an adult guardian present. That's airline policy." Cameron pulls out his phone, starts searching airline policies, his fingers moving quickly. "Ma'am, I'm looking at the website right now. There's no such rule. Unaccompanied minors can sit anywhere their tickets allow. You're making this up." "Are you calling me a liar, young man?" Susan's voice goes sharp with authority challenged. "I've been doing this job for 30 years. I know the policies better than some website, and I'm telling you that you cannot sit in first class. Then we need to speak to a supervisor, Caleb says, his voice staying steady despite the fear underneath. Someone who can verify the actual rules, because we have valid tickets and you're not letting us use them. You'll speak to whoever I decide you speak to, Susan snaps. Right now you need to accept that you're being moved to economy. Those are your options. Comply or be removed from this flight entirely for interfering with crew operations. The threat hangs in the air, the possibility that refusing to accept discrimination means missing their flight home entirely, that standing up for their rights might cost them more than surrendering, the impossible choice racism loves to force on its victims. But ma'am, we paid for first class. Cameron's voice breaks slightly. Our seats are 1A, 1B and 1C. Why can't we just sit in the seats our dad bought for us? Because I said so. Susan's voice carries finality. Because I'm responsible for maintaining standards in that cabin, because first-class passengers paid for a certain experience and I'm protecting their investment, because those seats are not appropriate for unaccompanied children regardless of what your tickets say. What she means but doesn't say is that those seats aren't appropriate for black children, that first class in her mind belongs to a certain demographic and 3 12-year-olds from Seattle don't fit her mental image of who deserves premium travel. Other passengers boarding around them slow down to watch, some looking sympathetic, others looking annoyed that there's a holdup, none speaking up to challenge Susan's authority, none questioning whether her treatment of these children crosses lines that shouldn't be crossed. A white businessman in his 50s walks past, makes eye contact with Caleb for a moment, his expression suggesting he knows this is wrong, then looks away and continues into the aircraft, choosing his comfort over their dignity, another bystander who will later claim he didn't want to get involved. Please just let us call our dad, Chloe begs, tears starting to flow now. He can explain everything, he can verify the tickets, he bought them because he wanted us to rest after visiting our grandparents. Your father can verify things when we land. Susan dismisses her. Right now you have 2 choices, accept reassignment to economy or leave this aircraft. You have 60 seconds to decide. The triplets look at each other, communicating without words the way siblings who've shared a womb can communicate, trying to decide whether fighting is worth potentially missing their flight home entirely, whether dignity matters more than logistics. We'll call our dad, Caleb decides. He'll fix this, he always fixes things, you'll see that we're telling the truth. He pulls out his phone, dials his father's number, the call going straight to voicemail because 3,000 miles away Marcus Mitchell sits in a conference room negotiating an acquisition worth hundreds of millions. His phone silenced because this meeting matters, unaware that his children are being destroyed. Dad, it's Caleb. The voicemail message comes out rushed and scared. We're at the Orlando gate and the flight attendant won't let us board. She says our tickets are fake. She says we can't sit in first class. Please call us back. We don't know what to do. Cameron tries their mother next. The call ringing through to Dr. Kendra Mitchell's phone sitting in a locker outside an operating room where she's currently performing surgery on a 6-year-old with a congenital heart defect, unavailable to rescue her children from racism that doesn't pause for emergencies. Mom, we need you. Cameron's voicemail is quieter, defeated. The lady at the gate says we're liars. She won't believe our tickets are real. Dad's not answering. Please call us when you get this. Susan Carmichael stands in the jetway blocking the entrance to the aircraft, her body language radiating authority she believes is unquestionable, her 30 years with the airline giving her confidence that these 3 black children will eventually comply, will accept that their place is economy, not first class, will learn the lesson she's determined to teach about knowing where you belong. The triplets stand facing her with boarding passes that should grant them access but instead have become evidence in a trial where their guilt was predetermined, where their skin color convicted them before they spoke a word, where excellence and legitimacy matter less than a flight attendant's prejudice. I'm going to ask you one more time. Susan's voice carries that patient condescension adults use when explaining obvious things to children they consider slow. Who really bought these tickets? Because 12-year-olds don't purchase first-class tickets on their own. Someone had to do this and I need to know who. Our father bought them, Caleb repeats for what feels like the 100th time. Marcus Mitchell, he's our dad, he wanted us comfortable flying home from visiting our grandparents. That's not illegal, that's not suspicious, that's just a parent taking care of his kids. Marcus Mitchell, Susan repeats the name like she's cataloging it for future reference. And what does your father do for work that he can afford 3 first-class tickets on a whim? He works in technology, Cameron answers, careful not to reveal too much because their father taught them that wealth makes you a target, that staying private protects the family, that not everyone needs to know your business. Technology, Susan's voice mocks the vagueness. So he works at Best Buy or Apple Store or something, saved up his paychecks to buy his kids one fancy flight. Is that what you're telling me? The assumption that their father must have a retail job, must have scraped together money he barely has, must be living beyond his means to afford premium travel, the automatic devaluing of black professional success, the refusal to imagine that excellence and wealth might exist without being borrowed or fraudulent. No ma'am, Chloe tries to maintain politeness despite the tears starting. He has his own company, he's successful, he can afford these tickets. Why don't you believe us? Because children lie, Susan says flatly. Because people use miles and points that don't belong to them, because I've seen this before, people gaming the system to sit in seats they didn't really pay for, and I'm not going to let it happen on my flight. She turns to address the growing line of passengers behind the triplets, performing for an audience now. I apologize for this delay, folks. We're just verifying some ticket irregularities. We'll have you boarded shortly once we resolve this situation with these children. The way she says these children carries contempt, othering, the suggestion that normal well-behaved kids wouldn't create this problem, that the delay is their fault not hers, that patience is required because she's protecting everyone from something unspecified but clearly problematic. A white woman in her 40s, designer luggage and platinum status hanging from her bag, speaks up. Excuse me, is there really a problem or are we just being delayed because these kids are? She pauses, searching for words that sound acceptable. Traveling alone? Susan jumps on the validation. Exactly, these are unaccompanied minors trying to sit in first class. There are regulations about that, policies designed to protect the premium cabin experience. What regulations? Caleb challenges, his phone still showing the airline website. Show me where it says unaccompanied minors can't use first-class tickets. Show me the actual policy. Young man, I don't need to show you anything. Susan's voice hardens. I'm the authority here. I make the determinations about passenger seating, and I'm determining that you 3 need to be reassigned to economy where frankly you'll probably be more comfortable anyway. The suggestion that they'd be more comfortable in economy, that first class is somehow beyond their capacity to appreciate or deserve, that their natural habitat is the cheaper seats where people like them belong, microaggression wrapped in concern. We don't want to be more comfortable in economy, Cameron says, his voice breaking. We want to sit in the seats our dad paid for, the seats we're supposed to be in. Why is that so hard to understand? Because I'm maintaining standards, Susan snaps, her patience wearing thin. First-class passengers pay premium prices for premium service. They don't pay to sit next to unaccompanied children who may or may not have legitimate tickets. May or may not. Despite the gate agent confirming legitimacy, despite the boarding passes scanning correctly, despite zero actual evidence of fraud beyond Susan's assumptions about who deserves first class. The businessman who looked away earlier is now filming on his phone, capturing Susan's escalating aggression, documenting the casual cruelty of authority unchecked, evidence that will matter later but does nothing to help 3 kids standing in a jetway watching their simple trip home become a public spectacle. Please, we just want to go home. Chloe's crying now makes her words barely intelligible. We've been traveling since this morning, we're tired, we miss our parents, we just want to sit down and sleep. Why are you being so mean to us? I'm not being mean, Susan's voice suggests offense at the accusation. I'm doing my job, I'm following policy, I'm protecting the integrity of premium cabin service. If that feels mean to you, then maybe you need to examine why you're trying to sit somewhere you don't belong. The cruelty of suggesting that their discomfort is self-inflicted, that being discriminated against is somehow their fault for aspiring above their station, that hurt feelings are the price of attempting to access spaces reserved for others. Other first-class passengers start boarding around the triplets, squeezing past them in the narrow jetway, some offering sympathetic looks but all staying silent, none willing to tell Susan she's wrong, none risking their own comfort to defend 3 children clearly being mistreated. If you've ever watched adults abuse power against children who have no way to fight back, If you've ever seen someone use policy that doesn't exist to justify prejudice that shouldn't exist, this moment should make you furious. 17 passengers walked past those triplets in that jetway, some recorded video for social media clout, not one told Susan to stop. Subscribe if you believe bystander silence enables the harm we witness. Like this video if you think protecting children matters more than avoiding awkward confrontation, because what happens in the next 60 minutes will show you that sometimes standing up to injustice requires more than sympathy, it requires action. Susan finally makes her ultimatum. Final decision time: you accept economy reassignment or you get off this aircraft and explain to your parents why you missed your flight because you were being difficult. What's it going to be? The triplets look at each other, 12 years old and facing a choice no child should face: comply with discrimination or miss their flight home, surrender dignity or sacrifice logistics, accept humiliation or risk something worse. We're calling our dad. Caleb decides again. He needs to know what you're doing, he needs to hear how you're treating us. But Marcus Mitchell's phone stays silent 3,000 miles away, and the triplets' calls keep going to voicemail, and Susan's smile grows wider with each failed attempt, her power seemingly absolute, her victory seemingly certain. 90 minutes of nightmare just beginning. 45 minutes into their ordeal, the triplets still stand in the jetway, their legs aching from standing, their spirits crushed from repeated humiliation, their hope fading with each minute that passes without rescue, watching passengers board around them like they're invisible obstacles rather than children being destroyed. Susan has moved from questioning their tickets to questioning their entire existence, her interrogation expanding with the confidence of someone who's never faced consequences, who's learned that challenging black passengers earns approval not discipline, who believes she's protecting standards rather than perpetrating cruelty. So let me get this straight. Susan addresses them like she's solving a mystery. Your father, who allegedly works in technology, somehow has enough money to buy 3 first-class tickets costing over $4,000 total, and you expect me to believe he just casually spent that on children flying alone? Yes, ma'am, Cameron answers, his voice hollow with exhaustion. Our dad wanted us comfortable. That's not a crime. Parents buy their kids things all the time. Not first-class tickets, they don't, Susan counters. Most parents buy economy because that's appropriate for children. First class is for business travelers and adults who appreciate premium service. It's wasted on kids who can't tell the difference. The assumption that children, specifically these black children, lack the capacity to appreciate or deserve comfort, that luxury is wasted on them, that their proper place is cramped middle seats in the back of the plane where their kind belongs. We can tell the difference, Chloe says quietly. We've flown economy before, it's uncomfortable, we're tall for our age and the seats are small. Dad wanted us to rest. What's wrong with that? What's wrong is the extravagance. Susan's voice carries judgment about financial decisions that aren't hers to make. What's wrong is the priorities. Spending thousands on one flight when that money could be used responsibly, it suggests poor decision-making, it suggests maybe these tickets were purchased with funds that should have gone elsewhere. The implication lands like a slap, the suggestion that their family mismanages money, that buying comfort for children represents irresponsibility, that black wealth must be explained and justified and questioned in ways white wealth never is. You don't know anything about our family. Caleb's voice rises with anger finally breaking through fear. You don't know what our dad does. You don't know how hard he works. You're just making assumptions because we're black and you can't imagine black people being successful enough to afford first class. Don't you dare play the race card with me. Susan's face flushes red. This has nothing to do with race. It has everything to do with policy and appropriate use of premium cabin space. I would question any unaccompanied children in first class regardless of their background. But Cameron pulls up his phone again, shows her search results. I've been looking at travel forums. Hundreds of families fly their kids in first class unaccompanied. I see pictures of white kids in first class all the time. When's the last time you questioned their tickets and called them liars? That's different. Susan sputters without explaining how. Those situations were verified. Those tickets were clearly legitimate. This situation has red flags that those didn't have. What red flags? Caleb demands. Our tickets scanned correctly. The gate agent confirmed they're legitimate. We have proper ID and unaccompanied minor paperwork. What exactly is suspicious except the color of our skin? I've already explained my concerns. Susan's voice goes cold with authority challenged. And if you continue being disruptive, I'll have you removed from this flight entirely. Airport police can escort you out and your parents can deal with getting you home some other way. The threat escalates. The suggestion that standing up for themselves constitutes disruption, that questioning discrimination equals bad behavior, that their choices are submit or be forcibly removed, comply or be punished. Other flight attendants start boarding passengers now, working around Susan's confrontation, uncomfortable expressions suggesting they know this is wrong but unwilling to challenge their lead, institutional hierarchy protecting prejudice, seniority mattering more than justice. A younger flight attendant named Jessica approaches tentatively. Susan, maybe we should just let them board. Their tickets are valid. We're delaying departure. The captain is asking what's taking so long. I'm handling this, Jessica, Susan snaps. These children need to understand that rules exist for reasons, that first class isn't a playground, that there are standards to maintain. But they're just trying to go home. Jessica tries again, her voice showing sympathy her actions won't match. They're tired, they're scared, can't we just seat them and move on? When I want your opinion, I'll ask for it. Susan's voice cuts like ice. You've been with this airline 3 years, I've been here 30, I think I know how to handle irregular passenger situations better than you do. Jessica retreats, her brief courage exhausted. Another potential ally choosing her job security over 3 children's dignity. Another bystander who will claim she tried when the truth is she tried barely and surrendered immediately. Chloe sits down on the jetway floor, her legs unable to hold her anymore, her crying silent now because she's run out of tears, her hand clutching her phone where 17 unanswered calls to her parents prove that sometimes you can be surrounded by people and still be completely alone. Honey, you can't sit there, Susan says with exasperation. You're blocking the boarding path, you need to stand up. I can't stand anymore. Chloe's voice is barely a whisper. My legs hurt, I'm tired, I just want to go home. Please just let us go home. Then accept the economy seats I'm offering. Susan presents this as generosity rather than capitulation to invented rules. Stop being stubborn. Stop making this harder than it needs to be. Just accept that first class isn't happening and we can all move forward. Why do you hate us? Cameron asks, the question direct and devastating. What did we do to make you treat us like this? Why can't you just believe we're telling the truth? I don't hate you, Susan's voice suggests offense. I'm doing my job, I'm following protocol. If you're interpreting that as hatred, then that's your problem, not mine. The deflection, the refusal to own the cruelty, the suggestion that experiencing discrimination is a character flaw in the victim, not the perpetrator, gaslighting elevated to institutional practice. Caleb tries calling his father one more time, the 15th attempt, the phone ringing and ringing before going to voicemail again. Dad, please answer. His message comes out broken. We really need you. This lady won't let us board. She's threatening to kick us off completely. We don't know what to do anymore. Please call us back. 3,000 miles away, Marcus Mitchell sits in a conference room finalizing an acquisition that will add hundreds of millions to his company's value. His phone face down on the table, still silenced, unaware that while he negotiates business, his children are being taught that black excellence still isn't protection against white authority that refuses to see them as worthy. Susan checks her watch. 62 minutes since the started. Departure delayed beyond acceptable limits. Her power play costing the airline money in gate fees and passenger connections, but her pride won't let her back down now. Won't let 3 black children win by simply being right. The captain finally emerges from the cockpit, his presence drawing immediate attention. Captain Richard Torres, in his late 50s with 30 years of flying experience, a man who's seen countless passenger disputes but whose expression suggests this one feels different, feels wrong in ways that demand his intervention. Susan, what's the holdup? His voice carries professional concern mixed with frustration. We're 90 minutes past scheduled departure. Gate control is threatening to pull us. Corporate is asking questions. What's going on with these passengers? Captain, I'm handling a ticketing irregularity. Susan straightens her posture, performing competence for her superior. 3 unaccompanied minors presenting first-class tickets that don't meet our standards for premium cabin placement. What standards? Torres looks genuinely confused. If their tickets are valid and they're properly documented as unaccompanied minors, what's the issue? The issue is appropriateness, Susan says with the confidence of someone convinced she's right. First class is meant for business travelers and adults, not children flying alone. I'm exercising discretion to maintain cabin standards. Show me the regulation. Torres pulls out his tablet. Show me where company policy says unaccompanied minors can't use first-class tickets they legitimately purchased. Susan hesitates, realizing she's being called to defend a policy that doesn't exist, that she invented in the moment to justify predetermined conclusions about who belongs where. It's standard practice, Captain. It's understood within the industry. It's about maintaining the premium experience. That's not a regulation, Torres says flatly. That's your opinion, and your opinion doesn't override valid tickets. These children have every right to sit in the seats their family paid for. He turns to the triplets, his expression softening. Kids, I'm Captain Torres. I'm deeply sorry for what you've experienced. Your tickets are completely valid. You're welcome to board and take your assigned first-class seats right now. The triplets look at each other, relief and residual fear mixing, afraid to believe this nightmare might actually end. Afraid Susan will find some new objection, some new reason to block them. Thank you, sir, Caleb says, his voice shaking. We've been trying to tell her that for over an hour. We just want to go home to Seattle. We just want to see our parents. Captain, with all due respect, Susan tries one more time. I have serious concerns about the legitimacy of how these tickets were obtained. The circumstances don't add up. Someone needs to verify. The gate agent already verified them. Torres interrupts. You radioed her 60 minutes ago. She confirmed legitimate purchase, full payment, no fraud indicators. What more verification do you need? But children don't fly first class alone. Susan's voice rises with desperation. Their story doesn't make sense. Their father supposedly bought these expensive tickets but isn't traveling with them. That's suspicious behavior. It's not suspicious, it's parenting, Torres says, his patience clearly exhausted. Parents buy their kids things all the time. Comfort for a long flight isn't evidence of fraud, and frankly your hour-long interrogation of these children is what's suspicious here. I'm protecting this airline, Susan insists. I'm preventing potential problems. I'm maintaining standards that made this carrier what it is. You're harassing children, Torres corrects. You're delaying my flight, you're creating the exact problem you claim to be preventing, and you're doing it based on assumptions I'm not comfortable with. The implication hangs heavy, Torres stopping short of explicitly naming race but making clear he understands what's really happening, that Susan's objections have nothing to do with policy and everything to do with prejudice. Kids, go ahead and board. Torres gestures toward the aircraft. Find your seats, get comfortable, we'll be wheels up shortly, and I personally apologize for this delay. The triplets gather their backpacks, Nana Grace's scarves and Papa Joe's photo album and the leftover pecan pie, all the evidence of love from grandparents who raised them to believe they deserve dignity, who taught them excellence should matter, who never imagined their grandchildren would spend 90 minutes proving their worthiness to sit in seats their son-in-law purchased. They walk past Susan, who stands rigid with fury, past first-class passengers who've been watching this drama unfold, some looking sympathetic now that authority has intervened, others looking annoyed at the delay, none having spoken up when speaking up might have mattered. Caleb, Cameron and Chloe find their seats, 1A, 1B and 1C, the wide leather chairs their father wanted them to have, the comfort that should have been theirs from the start, collapsing into spaces they had to fight for, exhausted from battle they shouldn't have faced. Other passengers settle around them, the cabin filling with business travelers and families, people who heard everything or nothing, who witnessed discrimination or missed it, who will remember this flight or forget it, choices about attention and action that determine whether injustice gets challenged or normalized. Susan stands in the galley, her face showing humiliation and unrepentant anger, speaking quietly to Jessica, the junior flight attendant. This isn't over. Those kids may have won today, but I know what I saw. I know the type. Next time I'll document better. I'll build a stronger case. Jessica says nothing, discomfort written across her features, complicity through silence. Another crew member who knows wrong when she sees it but lacks courage to name it, institutional culture protecting itself at the expense of those it's supposed to serve. The triplets try their father again. Caleb's phone showing 18 missed calls now, his voicemail box filling with increasingly desperate messages. Dad, we're finally on the plane, he says to the recording. The captain made the flight attendant let us board, but it was really bad. She said terrible things. Everyone was watching. We really need to talk to you when you can. Cameron texts their mother. Short message that understates everything. Mom, we had trouble boarding. Flight attendant gave us hard time. We're okay now, but call when you can. Love you. Chloe just sits quietly crying, not the loud sobbing from earlier but silent tears that speak to deeper hurt, to dignity stripped away in public, to the lesson learned that being right isn't always protection, that tickets and truth don't always matter when authority decides you don't belong. The plane pushes back from the gate finally, 97 minutes late, the delay attributed to maintenance in the official record, Susan's harassment erased from documentation, institutional habit of protecting reputation over acknowledging harm, the way systems bury evidence of their own failures. Captain Torres makes an announcement, his voice carrying to every seat. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. I want to personally apologize for our extended delay. We had some passenger service issues at the gate that took longer than expected to resolve. Thank you for your patience. Passenger service issues, the sanitized language that erases children's tears, that transforms discrimination into inconvenience, that allows everyone to pretend nothing serious happened, business as usual with minor complications. But in Seattle, Marcus Mitchell's phone starts buzzing, his meeting finally ending, notifications flooding in, 18 missed calls from his children, multiple voicemails, text messages, the accumulation of crisis he missed while building his empire. Marcus Mitchell walks out of the QuantumCore Solutions conference room at exactly 3:47 p.m. Seattle time. The acquisition deal finally signed, $800 million in new assets secured, his executive team congratulating themselves on negotiations that went better than expected, everyone riding the high of corporate victory. He pulls his phone from his pocket, the screen lighting up with notifications that make his heart stop, 18 missed calls from Caleb, 16 from Cameron, 14 from Chloe, the numbers telling a story of escalating desperation, of children trying repeatedly to reach a father who wasn't available. His hands shake slightly as he opens the voicemail app, plays the first message, hears Caleb's voice trying to stay calm. Dad, it's Caleb, we're at the Orlando gate and the flight attendant won't let us board. She says our tickets are fake. She says we can't sit in first class. Please call us back. We don't know what to do. Marcus's jaw tightens, his executive persona cracking as father mode activates. Plays the next message. Cameron's voice quieter, defeated. Mom, we need you. The lady at the gate says we're liars. She won't believe our tickets are real. Dad's not answering. Please call us when you get this. He skips ahead to the most recent messages, needs to know if his children are safe, if the situation resolved, plays Caleb's 18th call left just minutes ago. Dad, we're finally on the plane. The captain made the flight attendant let us board, but it was really bad. She said terrible things. Everyone was watching. We really need to talk to you when you can. The relief that they're safe mixes with rage that they suffered, that for 90 minutes his children faced discrimination alone, that wealth and preparation and legitimate tickets weren't protection, that he failed them by being unreachable when they needed him most. He calls Caleb back immediately, the phone barely completing one ring before his son answers. Dad? Caleb's voice breaks on the single word. Dad, where were you? We called so many times. We needed you. I'm here now, baby, Marcus says, his voice steady for his children despite fury building underneath. Tell me exactly what happened. Don't leave anything out. I need to know everything. The triplets take turns, their voices overlapping, painting a picture of 90 minutes of humiliation, Susan's accusations, her invented policies, her public questioning of their legitimacy, her threats to remove them from the flight, Captain Torres finally intervening, passengers watching and recording but not defending. She said we were using tickets we didn't earn. Cameron's voice shakes with remembered shame. She said you probably used points fraudulently. She said we didn't belong in first class. She made everyone think we were criminals. She examined our boarding passes like they were fake. Chloe adds, her crying audible through the phone. She told other passengers she was maintaining standards, like we would ruin their experience just by existing, like our skin color was the problem. What's the flight attendant's name? Marcus asks, his voice going quiet in the way his children recognize as dangerous. The calm before consequences, the stillness before storms that reshape landscapes. Susan Carmichael, Caleb says. She's the lead flight attendant. She told everyone she's been doing this for 30 years. She acted like she owned the plane. Marcus opens his laptop right there in the hallway, pulls up the airline's corporate directory, finds Susan Carmichael's employee record, sees 30 years of service, sees 17 complaints over that time, sees pattern of behavior directed primarily at passengers of color, sees evidence that the airline knew about her prejudice and did nothing meaningful to stop it. Are you still on the ground? Marcus asks. Has the plane taken off yet? We're taxiing now, Cameron reports. We just pulled away from the gate. We should be in the air in a few minutes. Listen to me carefully, Marcus says, his voice carrying the authority of a man who built an empire from nothing and knows exactly how to wield power. You three did nothing wrong. You were right. She was wrong. What she did was illegal discrimination, and I'm going to make sure she never does it again. What are you going to do? Chloe asks, hope and fear mixing in her question. First, I'm calling the airline CO, Marcus says, already pulling up his contacts. David Richardson serves on my corporate board. He's going to hear about this from me personally. Then I'm calling our attorneys. Then I'm filing formal complaints with every regulatory agency that oversees airlines. But we're already on the plane, Caleb says. It's over. We got our seats. Maybe we should just let it go. No, baby, this doesn't get let go. Marcus's voice is steel wrapped in love. What that woman did wasn't just wrong. It was criminal. She discriminated against you based on race. She violated federal law. She traumatized my children, and I promise you there will be consequences. He puts the call on speaker, dials David Richardson, CEO of the airline. The phone picked up on the second ring. Marcus, good to hear from you. David's voice is friendly and unsuspecting. I hope you're calling with good news about the board meeting next month. David, we have a serious problem. Marcus cuts through pleasantries. My 12-year-old triplets just spent 90 minutes being racially profiled by one of your flight attendants. They were denied boarding in first class despite valid tickets. They were publicly humiliated and threatened with removal, all because Susan Carmichael decided black children don't belong in premium cabins. The line goes silent, David processing the magnitude of what he's hearing, understanding immediately that this isn't just a customer service complaint but a crisis involving one of his board members' children, potential lawsuit, regulatory investigation, public relations nightmare. Marcus, I'm horrified. David's voice shifts to damage control mode. Tell me everything. I need all the details. We'll investigate immediately and take appropriate action. Investigation can come later, Marcus says. Right now I need you to understand that your 30-year employee just violated my children's civil rights, created a hostile environment based on race, and did it so confidently that she must have believed your airline would back her up. What does that say about your company culture? It says we have systemic problems, David admits. Marcus, I'm not going to make excuses. If what you're describing happened, then we failed your children catastrophically. We failed our obligation to treat all passengers with dignity. Your employee told my kids they probably used fraudulent points, Marcus continues. She suggested I mismanaged money by buying them comfort. She made them stand in a jetway for 90 minutes while passengers walked past and said nothing. She threatened them with removal when they tried to call me. She traumatized 3 12-year-olds whose only crime was being black with tickets she couldn't accept. Where is she now? David asks. Is she still working the flight? She's working the flight to Seattle, Marcus says. My kids are on that aircraft right now, having to share space with a woman who just spent 90 minutes trying to destroy them, having to smile and accept service from someone who told them they don't belong. I'm pulling her off that flight, David says immediately. I'm calling the captain right now. She'll be removed before takeoff. Your children don't have to see her again. Too late for that, Marcus says. They've already been traumatized. Removing her now doesn't undo what she did, but it's a start. And David, I want her terminated. I want formal complaints filed with FAA and DOT. I want your head of HR on a call with me within the hour. Marcus Mitchell boards his chartered Gulfstream G650 at Boeing Field in Seattle exactly 43 minutes after hanging up with David Richardson, his executive assistant having arranged everything with the efficiency that $8.3 billion buys, the fastest civilian aircraft available, fueled and ready, flight plan filed for Orlando, justice departing on schedule. The 2-hour flight feels like eternity, Marcus spending every minute on calls with lawyers, with the airline's general counsel, with his own head of security, building a case that will be airtight, gathering evidence that will be undeniable, preparing consequences that will reshape how an entire industry treats passengers who don't fit their prejudiced assumptions. His attorney Patricia Chen briefs him on federal regulations Susan violated, Civil Rights Act protections against discrimination in public accommodations, Department of Transportation rules about passenger treatment, FAA regulations about crew conduct, the legal framework that should have protected his children but didn't because enforcement requires someone with resources to demand it. We have grounds for civil suit, Patricia says. Discrimination, intentional infliction of emotional distress, false imprisonment, the 90-minute detention in the jetway qualifies. We can seek damages and injunctive relief, force systemic changes. I want more than money, Marcus says. I want her terminated. I want everyone who witnessed and said nothing disciplined. I want training mandated. I want accountability that prevents the next family from experiencing what mine experienced. The Gulfstream lands in Orlando at 6:34 p.m., Marcus deplaning directly onto the tarmac, a rental car waiting, the 40-minute drive to the airport feeling longer than the flight, his mind replaying his children's voicemails, their fear, their confusion, their desperate need for protection he couldn't provide when they needed it most. He arrives at the terminal, parks in short term, walks through the airport with purpose that makes people move aside instinctively, reaches the gate area where Flight 847 still sits, delayed now for over 2 hours, passengers furious about missed connections, Airline scrambling to manage a crisis that Susan created and can't contain. The gate agent recognizes him from the photo David Richardson sent, her face showing relief mixed with dread, knowing his arrival means consequences are arriving too. Mr. Mitchell, she starts, but he walks past her onto the jetway, his destination clear, his mission focused. He enters the aircraft, his eyes immediately finding his children in seats 1A, 1B and 1C, their faces lighting up with relief and residual fear, all three starting to stand but he gestures for them to stay seated, his focus shifting to the woman standing in the galley, Susan Carmichael, who spent 2 hours believing she survived the situation, believing her seniority protected her, believing her version of events would prevail. Their eyes meet and Susan's face drains of color, some instinct telling her this man represents danger, this man brings consequences, this man is the father she dismissed as retail worker, the parent she suggested mismanaged money, the black man she assumed couldn't afford first class. Are you Susan Carmichael? Marcus asks, his voice carrying to every passenger in first class, 14 people who witnessed various parts of what happened, who stayed silent when speaking up might have helped, who are about to learn what accountability looks like. Yes, Susan's voice comes out smaller than it's been all day. I'm the lead flight attendant. How can I help you? I'm Marcus Mitchell, he says clearly. CEO of QuantumCore Solutions, father of the 3 children you spent 90 minutes discriminating against, and as of 47 minutes ago a very angry man with the resources and determination to make sure you never hurt another child again. The cabin goes completely silent, passengers frozen, some pulling out phones to record, all understanding they're witnessing something significant, something that will be remembered. Sir, I don't know what your children told you. Susan tries to maintain composure. But there were legitimate policy concerns, irregularities with their tickets. I was simply doing my job maintaining cabin standards. Stop lying, Marcus's voice cuts through her excuses. The gate agent verified their tickets were legitimate. Captain Torres confirmed there's no policy against unaccompanied minors in first class. You invented rules to justify discrimination. You traumatized my children because you couldn't accept that black 12-year-olds might deserve comfort. I did no such thing. Susan's voice rises defensively. This had nothing to do with race. It was about appropriate use of premium cabin space, about protecting the experience first-class passengers paid for. The passengers you were protecting are sitting right here. Marcus gestures at the 14 first-class passengers. Why don't we ask them if they needed protection from 3 polite children? Why don't we see if anyone here felt threatened by kids carrying their grandmother's scarves and their grandfather's photo album? No one speaks, the silence damning, witnesses who could defend Susan choosing not to because they can't, because her racism was too obvious, because even bystander complicity has limits. David Richardson asked me to inform you that you're terminated effective immediately, Marcus continues, his voice professional now, delivering corporate consequences. 30 years of service ending because you couldn't see 3 children as worthy of the seats their father purchased, because you let prejudice override judgment, because you traumatized kids who deserved your care. You can't do this, Susan's voice cracks. I have union protection, I have seniority. 1 complaint doesn't end a 30-year career. 17 complaints end a 30-year career, Marcus corrects. 17 times passengers reported your racism, 17 times the airline noted it and did nothing. Congratulations, Ms. Carmichael, my children were number 18 and the ones who finally mattered because their father has the power to demand accountability. He pulls out his phone, shows her the email David Richardson sent, termination effective immediately, final paycheck to be processed, benefits ceased, 3 decades of work reduced to a cautionary tale about what happens when racism targets the wrong family. I'm also filing formal complaints with the FAA and Department of Transportation, Marcus adds. Your actions violated federal regulations, you'll be investigated, you may face fines, you'll certainly never work in aviation again. Susan looks around desperately, seeking support, finding none, her fellow crew members avoiding eye contact, passengers watching with expressions ranging from satisfaction to discomfort, all understanding justice being delivered, none willing to defend her. Captain Torres emerges from the cockpit, his face showing he knew this was coming. Mr. Mitchell, I want to personally apologize for what your children experienced. Susan is being removed from this aircraft. The airline is covering all costs for your private jet home. We failed your family and we own that failure. Thank you, Captain, Marcus says. Your intervention earlier likely prevented even worse trauma. I appreciate you standing up when it mattered. He turns to his children, his expression softening. Pack your things, babies. We're going home on our plane. You don't have to spend another minute on this aircraft. You don't have to see this woman again. The triplets gather their belongings, their relief palpable, Caleb hugging his father first, Cameron and Chloe following, all 3 crying again but different tears now, release instead of trauma, safety instead of fear. As they walk off the aircraft, Marcus stops at the galley, looks directly at Susan one final time. You asked my children who really bought their tickets, implying they were frauds or thieves. You suggested their father must work retail, assuming black success must be explained away. You spent 90 minutes teaching them that excellence isn't always protection. Well, let me teach you something, Ms. Carmichael. Consequences eventually find racism. Justice may be delayed, but it arrives. And the children you tried to break just watched their father break you instead. The private jet ride home feels surreal to the triplets. Leather seats wider than first class. Cabin crew who treat them like precious cargo, not potential criminals. Their father sitting across from them radiating protective fury mixed with parental guilt for being unavailable when they needed him most. I'm sorry I didn't answer, Marcus says for the 3rd time, his voice breaking slightly. I'm sorry you had to go through that alone. I'm sorry my meeting mattered more than being reachable. I'm sorry I let you down when you needed me. You didn't let us down, Daddy, Chloe says, crawling into the seat beside him despite being 12 and supposed to be too old for that kind of comfort. You fixed it, you came, you made her face consequences. We're okay now because of you. But you weren't okay for 90 minutes. Marcus pulls all 3 children close, his arms barely spanning them. 90 minutes of my babies being humiliated while I negotiated stock options and acquisition terms. 90 minutes of trauma I should have prevented by just keeping my phone on. You couldn't have known, Caleb says reasonably. We've flown dozens of times without problems. You had no reason to think this time would be different. Nobody expects racism at a gate. Nobody plans for discrimination. That's exactly the problem, Marcus says heavily. I should expect it, I should plan for it. I'm a black man who grew up in Alabama during the 70s. I know racism doesn't die just because we achieve success. I know my money doesn't protect my children from people who can't see past their skin color. The corporate consequences continue unfolding even as they fly. Marcus's phone buzzing with updates, David Richardson following through on promises, Susan Carmichael's termination processed, her airline ID deactivated, her access to systems revoked, her personnel file flagged to prevent rehire, 30 years of career erased in hours. But criminal consequences prove harder. The airline's attorneys explaining that proving criminal intent for discrimination charges requires evidence Susan won't provide, admissions she won't make, prosecutors declining to file charges that juries might not convict, the legal system's familiar failure to criminalize racism that hides behind discretion. We can pursue civil suit, Patricia Chin tells Marcus over speakerphone. Discrimination, emotional distress, false imprisonment, will win, she has no defense. But understand this will take years and put your children through depositions, through reliving trauma, through becoming public faces of this incident. Marcus looks at his children, sees exhaustion in their faces, understands that justice through courts means more suffering, more exposure, more years defined by the worst day of their childhood. What do you three want, he asks them. This is your trauma, your choice. Do we sue or do we let the termination be enough? The triplets exchange looks, their silent communication resulting in Cameron speaking for all three. We don't want to be the kids who got discriminated against for years. We don't want depositions and trials and our faces on news. We want to heal and move forward. We want her fired to be enough. It's not enough, Marcus says honestly. She should face criminal charges. She should pay damages. She should suffer more than just losing her job. But I understand not wanting to sacrifice more of your childhood to get that justice. The airline offers settlement within 48 hours, $2.5 million divided among the three children, comprehensive anti-discrimination training for all staff, independent review board for passenger complaints, scholarship fund for children experiencing travel discrimination, policy changes that Marcus helps draft to prevent future Susan Carmichaels from wielding unchecked authority. It's hush money, Marcus tells his children. They want you to sign NDAs, to never speak publicly about what happened, to let them fix their problems privately without admitting fault publicly. I won't accept that unless you're comfortable with it. We don't want to be famous for being discriminated against, Brianna says. We want to be known for who we become, not what happened to us. If signing papers means we can move on, then let's sign and move on. 6 months later, Marcus testifies before the Department of Transportation about discrimination in air travel. His children's story anonymized, but his recommendations specific, mandatory bias training, consequences for complaints ignored, passenger bill of rights enforced, systemic changes bought with his children's trauma. Susan Carmichael applies for unemployment, discovers that termination for discrimination makes her ineligible, applies for retail positions, discovers viral videos of her racism make her unemployable, faces consequences that accumulate daily, financial stress, social isolation, reputation destroyed. Learning too late that 30 years of seniority doesn't protect against consequences when you target children whose father has power. She gives one interview to a local news station, tries to frame herself as victim of political correctness, claims she was just doing her job, insists race had nothing to do with her decisions, demonstrates that some people never learn, never grow, never accept responsibility, her defiance ensuring sympathy stays scarce. The triplets return to 7th grade changed, their innocence about how the world treats black excellence shattered, their trust in authority damaged, their understanding of racism evolved from abstract concept to lived experience, trauma they'll carry forever even as they learn to thrive despite it. They tell their story once, to their classmates during a presentation on civil rights, their teacher crying as they describe 90 minutes in a jetway, their peers shocked that racism this blatant still exists, education spreading through honest testimony about injustice survived. 5 years after Susan Carmichael destroyed herself trying to destroy 3 children, Caleb, Cameron, and Chloe Mitchell stand in the same Orlando airport, no longer 12 but 17, no longer scared kids but confident young adults heading to their respective colleges on full scholarships earned through excellence that racism tried to diminish but couldn't destroy. They deliberately book first class on the same airline, not because they need to prove anything but because they earn the right to sit wherever they choose, because comfort is theirs to claim without justification, because 5 years of healing taught them that claiming space is resistance, that refusing to shrink is victory. The gate agent processing their boarding passes is young, maybe mid-20s, sees 3 black teenagers with first-class tickets and smiles genuinely. Heading somewhere exciting, she asks with real interest, no suspicion in her voice, no examination of their legitimacy, just human kindness that should be normal but feels remarkable because they remember when it wasn't. College, Caleb answers. I'm going to MIT for computer science, Cameron's heading to Stanford for engineering, Chloe's going to Howard for political science. We're starting our next chapters. That's incredible, the agent says with authentic enthusiasm. Congratulations, you should be so proud, have a wonderful flight and best of luck with your studies. They board without incident, walk down the jetway where 5 years ago they stood crying, find their seats in first class where 5 years ago they were told they didn't belong, settle into comfort that's theirs by right not by battle, the difference profound. Do you think about that day? Chloe asks her brothers once they're seated. Do you remember how scared we were, how helpless we felt, how sure we were that being right wouldn't matter? Every time I fly, Cameron admits. Every time I board a plane I remember Susan's face, remember passengers walking past us, remember calling Dad 18 times before he answered, remember learning that sometimes you can do everything right and still be treated like you're wrong. But we also remember what came after, Caleb adds. We remember Dad chartering a jet, remember him walking onto that plane like an avenging angel, remember Susan's face when she realized who he was, remember learning that sometimes justice comes even when it takes too long. Their father Marcus used his position on the airline's board exactly as he promised, mandating comprehensive anti-discrimination training for all 20,000 employees, establishing an independent passenger rights review board with actual authority to investigate complaints, creating a scholarship fund that's already helped 37 children who experienced travel discrimination. But the changes weren't perfect, couldn't be perfect because systems built on inequality don't transform overnight. 3 flight attendants challenged the new training requirements claiming they violated their freedom. 2 gate agents were disciplined for racial profiling then reinstated on appeal. The review board's first year saw complaints dismissed that should have been upheld because changing policy is easier than changing culture. The triplets spent 2 years in therapy processing what happened, learning that being traumatized doesn't mean being broken, that healing isn't forgetting but integrating, that they can carry scars and still thrive, that one woman's hatred doesn't define their worth even when it tried to convince them otherwise. If you believe children shouldn't need billionaire fathers to protect them from discrimination, if you think one family's resources shouldn't determine whether racism faces consequences, subscribe to this channel because we're showing you that systemic change requires more than individual justice. Like this video if you understand that Caleb, Cameron, and Chloe survived because they had power most families don't have, because without that power countless other children's stories end differently, quietly, with no rescue coming and no accountability delivered. They testified before the Department of Transportation about discrimination in air travel, their voices adding weight to regulations that protect future passengers, their trauma converted into policy that prevents replication, their worst day transformed into safeguards for children who come after. Susan Carmichael works retail now. Her aviation career ended, her reputation destroyed, her comfortable retirement replaced by financial stress and social isolation, consequences real but measured against 3 children's trauma, feeling simultaneously too much and not enough, justice imperfect because justice always is. The triplets take off toward their futures, first-class seats they claimed not conquered, comfort they deserve not fought for, the difference mattering, evidence that healing happened even though scars remain, that their father's intervention mattered even though it came too late to prevent pain, that sometimes winning means surviving with dignity intact not emerging unscathed. And somewhere in America another black child boards another plane with legitimate tickets and faces another Susan Carmichael who can't imagine their excellence. The cycle continuing because individual consequences don't stop systemic problems, because one woman fired doesn't transform industry culture, because the work of justice never finishes. It just passes to the next generation who inherit both progress and persistent racism, both victories and ongoing battles, both hope and vigilant. Awareness that being right isn't always protection when authority decides you don't belong.